Hello everyone! Welcome to Books Mandala's YouTube channel. In this channel, we talk about everything and anything related to books. In today's video, we have a summary of the book The Story of My Life by Helen Keller. Helen Adams Keller was born on June 27, 1880, in Alabama. She was an American author, disabled rights activist and lecturer. She lost her sight and her hearing at the age of 19 months. With the help of her teacher, Anne Sullivan, she learned how to read and write. Despite being unable to hear and talk to people, she wrote 14 books and hundreds of speeches and essays. She attended the Radcliffe College of Harvard University and became the first deafblind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. She toured the United States and 35 other countries around the globe advocating for those with disabilities, women's rights, labor's right, and world peace. The Story of My Life is her autobiography written in 1903. It publicized her education and her life, and how Anne Sullivan was a major influence. She recounts her early childhood through her college years, outlining the various wonders and struggles she encountered on her journey to achieve her dream. When Helen Keller was 19 months old, she was struck with a horrible fever that left her without sight or hearing. Contemporary doctors believe it might have been meningitis. Before the illness, she had started to talk and showed signs of being a fast learner. But in the early years after her illness, she had to learn how to communicate in alternative ways. She would nod her head to say yes and shake her head to say no. Her mother was of great help to ensure that she was being understood by others and was taken care of. But as you can imagine, growing up deaf and blind is like living in the dark. She was often angry and frustrated due to not being able to understand others and make others understand her. Apparently, she would erupt into fits of rage when unable to express what she wanted. Everything changed in March of 1887 when Anne Sullivan came to live with the Keller family. Helen's parents were in search of a teacher for their 7-year-old daughter. After some referrals and recommendations, they came across Anne Sullivan, a 20-year-old who herself was visually impaired. This was a beginning of a nearly 50-year-long relationship. Sullivan turned Helen's world around and later became her governess and lifelong companion. The day Sullivan arrived at Keller's house on March 5, 1887, Helen refers to as her soul's birthday. Miss Sullivan began to teach Helen the names of objects by giving them to her and spelling out the letter of their name in her hand, beginning with DOLL for the doll that she had gifted to Helen. Although frustrated and overwhelmed at first, Helen began imitating Sullivan's hand gestures without understanding what she was doing. She writes, "I did not know that I was spelling a word or even that words existed. I was simply making my fingers go in monkey-like imitation." Eventually, Helen had a breakthrough moment when she realizes that the motions her teacher was making on her palm while running cool water over her other hand meant water. She was thrilled. From this point on, she acquired and understood language rapidly. She learned to love nature and education from Miss Sullivan. As an isolated and disabled child, these gifts allowed her to use her imagination to learn about everyday objects. In May 1888, Helen went to North Visit Boston with her mother and Miss Sullivan. There she studied at the Perkins Institute for the Blind and befriended other blind girls of her age. She also experienced the ocean for the first time, and she loved it so much that they spent nearly every winter up north after that. Once Helen had learned to read, she was determined to learn how to speak next. She went to New York in 1890 for speech lessons from Sarah Fuller at the Horace Mann School. She learned by feeling the position of Miss Fuller's lips and tongue when she spoke. As she progressed in her lessons, she spoke her first words, "It is warm." This was a powerful moment for her, and she was thrilled that she might be finally able to speak to her family and friends. In the winter of 1892, at the age of 11, Helen wrote a story called The Frost King, one of her earliest pieces of writing. Soon it was noticed that Helen's story was strikingly similar to another one called The Frost Fairies. What had happened was that Helen had this story read to her as a child. Although she forgot about it, the memory remained in her subconscious and she unwillingly plagiarized it. This incident tainted her relationship with her Perkins Institute teacher, Mr. Anaganos, and made her distrust her own mind. She also doubted the originality of her thoughts for a long time. In 1894, Helen began studying at the Wright-Humason School for the Deaf in New York City. She took formal subjects like history, Latin, French, German, and arithmetic. She fell in love with German literature and enjoyed learning about Greek and Latin languages, as well as French grammar. Unfortunately, Helen's father passed away during this time period, causing great sorrow to her family. Helen began her studies at the Cambridge School for Young Ladies in Massachusetts in 1896. This was the first time attending a school with girls who could see or hear, rather than other students who were also deaf or blind. She began preparing to attend Radcliffe College, the women's college affiliated with Harvard University. Her preparation at Cambridge School was going well until the school wished to lessen Helen's course load. Helen's mother strongly disagreed with this and withdrew Helen from the school. She then continued her preparation with a private teacher. Finally, in 1899, Helen qualified for Radcliffe and entered college in the fall of 1900. College came with new sets of obstacles, but Helen encountered them with grace and power and with the help of her family and teacher, Miss Sullivan. In 1904, at the age of 24, Helen graduated from Radcliffe, becoming the first deaf-blind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. The final 2 chapters include things like Helen's love for books, learning, and literature, her favorite pastimes, and the friends who shaped her life. The memoir ends here. Helen Keller was determined to learn more and communicate with others as conventionally as possible. She spent much of her life giving speeches and lectures on aspects of her life. She became proficient at using Braille and fingerspelling techniques to communicate. She also soon figured out that by placing her fingertips on a resonant tabletop, she could experience music playing close by. After Anne Sullivan's health started failing around 1914, Polly Thompson was hired to keep house and keep company with Helen. Although Polly had no prior experience with deaf or blind people, she became a constant companion to Keller. Anne Sullivan died on October 20, 1936, at the age of 70, with Keller holding her hand. Polly Thompson died on March 21, 1960. Helen had a series of strokes in 1961 and spent the last years of her life at her home. She died in her sleep on June 1, 1968, at her home, only a few weeks before her 88th birthday. Her body was cremated, and her ashes were buried at the Washington National Cathedral next to her companions Anne Sullivan and Polly Thompson. Thank you for watching the video. We hope you found it useful. You can purchase this book from booksmandala.com. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to our channel for more bookish content.